Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, veuillez accueillir, please welcome Danielle Harris, Olivier Ribet, Fathi Tlatli en conversation avec In Conversation with Katie Turnbull.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this session. We have three outstanding panelists that will be talking about optimizing goods transportation and traffic to cities. Danielle Harris is a senior transportation planner with the San Francisco Transportation Municipal Agency, obviously in San Francisco. Fathi is the General Automotive Sector President for DHL Customer Solutions and Innovations, and Olivier Ribet is the Executive Vice President of Global Operations for Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and Russia for Dassault Systems. So we've got three different perspectives from the urban space that's important for, obviously, urban goods movement. We'll also have the opportunity to hear from you and for you to ask questions. So I'd ask you, if you're interested in that, to use the Slido app, and if you go ahead and start downloading that. As we get toward the end of our 45 minutes, we'll give you the opportunity to ask questions for our panelists. We'd like to start off by asking all three to start with their ideas on what the major issues and opportunities are for the last mile deliveries in urban areas. And it's really probably even shorter than the last mile. In many cases, it might be the last 50 feet. So Danielle, if we could start with you from the city of San Francisco, your perspective on the issues, opportunities, and maybe what you see as some of the solutions, short-term and your long-term visions.
Yeah, definitely. One, I want to thank Michelin for having me here at Movin'On. So from the city perspective, I would say that, with information moving a lot faster, I think all of us are having to move a lot faster, right? And so with that, there is more trips happening on our transportation network than ever before. And so the frequency in which people are touching the curb and wanting to move around is increasing. So the volume is increasing, the frequency is increasing. And so the number of services that are trying to meet everybody's needs are also increasing. However, the capacity within our streets is not necessarily increasing at the same rate, right? I think it's a lot harder to move infrastructure than it is to move a service or to move individuals. And so my job within the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency is to, one, understand the change that's coming from our citizenry, understanding the new demands, and really trying to understand how do we best adapt the transportation network. As you know, it's millions of dollars of infrastructure, and that's not something that we take lightly. As you know, we don't have shareholders, we have the public citizenry. So it's a lot different, so we have to be a lot more accountable. And so trying to understand, one, what is moving exactly, and what is the intention? Like, are we trying to resolve food deserts? Are we trying to provide meals to people that are not able-bodied? Or are we just trying to get someone a sandwich in the middle of the peak hour? And so that's very different. So I think it's a huge challenge, but for me, what's most exciting is the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of different companies and understand what is their ambition.
Great. Oliver?
So in our perspective, of course, we see the same. We see an incredible growth of shipments to cities. If you take 2015 as a base, so by 2020, it will be 3 times more, shipments to cities, mostly because of e-commerce. We see also issues, of course, of congestions and pollution, and that means that some cities are limiting the access to their centers, plus some areas. And importantly, which is maybe driving all that, we see customers' expectations in terms of speed and convenience. So, and of course, we have to address these elements. We have to address them by smart city logistics solutions. For example, delivery to trunks. We can also deliver to trunks in-night deliveries. We have also at DHL a policy of zero emission by 2050. We reached 30% emission less in 10 years' time between 2007 and 2017. And we have programs in terms of burn less, burn clean, burn less, massify the goods in the cities with the consolidation centers. We have also crowdsourcing platforms for transportation, but also burn clean. We worked on programs where we developed our own vans, street scooters for deliveries in town, electric vans that are highly ergonomic, because initially no single OEM was interested to provide, such a solution. And now we have a few thousand of these. And last but not least, what we see also is the rise of artificial intelligence that help us to be more predictive, more proactive, and to better optimizing our routing and our planning.
Great, great. Oliver.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the cities or the public and private operators we work with, most of the questions that they ask themselves and they ask us for technical solution and software solutions boils down to two dimensions, a dimension of space and a dimension of time. So you need to deal with how do you transform and optimize what you have today, and how do you imagine and invent tomorrow, knowing that it can be a tomorrow in 2 years from now or in 10 years from now. And then the question is, what is the perspective that you take? Do you take a political perspective, an economical perspective, a societal and behavioral perspective, a technological perspective, an environmental perspective? And at the end of the day, the answer is yes. You need to take all of these dimensions and really look at that as a system of objects, a system of flows, a system of software solutions, material, and so on and so forth. But everybody agrees that at the end of the day, it has to be optimized around the experience of individuals. Individuals who are doctors, physicians, scholars, public transportation people, all the different constituencies of the city, and how do you create a unified environment that will allow everyone to have a temporal view and a geographical view. And this is an interesting challenge.
Good. Well, you've all mentioned the diverse stakeholders involved in, obviously, urban goods movement, and key is the public side and the private side, and maybe some examples, Danielle, from San Francisco. How do you engage the private companies, whether they're the deliveries or the technology? And obviously, San Francisco is in the hotbed of technology development, Silicon Valley. Does that present some both unique challenges, but maybe also unique opportunities?
Yeah, definitely both. So in terms of unique opportunities, I think them being, they call San Francisco home, so it's really just like walking over to our neighbors. Literally, Uber's office is right next to my office, so it makes it really easy to have conversations about Uber Eats and also their ride-hail service. And we also sat down with a number of other companies like Postmates and DoorDash to really understand what are their operations. And I think we're changing the tone of the conversation. That's really what we're doing in San Francisco. We're just having an open, get to know each other type of conversation rather than a, don't do this, or you're hurting this, And so really to understand, what is the motivation? What are you providing? What is the value add that you're bringing to San Francisco so that we can better understand your operation as a whole? And so those conversations have led to opportunities to collaborate and to better understand how we can work together. Specifically, an example I have is we've worked with the ride-hail companies to figure out how we pair their digital infrastructure, which is the geofencing that tells a rider and a driver to meet here, with the physical infrastructure, which is my side, to clear a curb, to provide a sign, and to create wayfinding to get people to that location so that we're working in tandem. And so those types of collaborations really give me hope that this is really the future to move forward. I do want to say that there is a level, going back to the challenges, the willingness to be transparent is a challenge, and I really understand that from a competitive nature for the companies is the fact that, you don't exactly want to share all of the progress that you're making with your competitors. And so for me, I really am working towards a data-focused approach. So I do need to know how many pickups and drop-offs are you having, how many goods are you delivering, what type of vehicles are you operating, at what time of day are you operating. And for me, the most important one is why are you operating? Is it a convenience factor? Like you're trying to get a nail clipper into a downtown area? That was an example from a previous conference. Or is it a situation where it's a food desert or something like that, or there's no shopping available? And so those are the types of things that I really want to consider as we develop policies and infrastructure changes.
Good. And I think you mentioned that the whole Uber Eats, the delivery of food is what now, 20 to 30%, I think you said, of some businesses. So obviously that's now an important segment and probably will grow.
Yeah, so that is kind of to be on those platforms. Operators, restaurants, for instance, have to give 30 to 40% of their revenue to these platforms which are really operating as a switchboard, connecting the restaurants to the couriers to the customers. And so that's a huge factor for us because small businesses create about 80% of the jobs within San Francisco. And so San Francisco really prides itself, similar to Montreal, in these small neighborhoods and wanting to provide a very neighborhood experience. And so we want those types of businesses to stay in San Francisco.
Great.
Yeah, actually, you said something very relevant. Very often people focus a lot on the what and the how, but not enough on the why. So the why is very important. And as far as we think of the why, collaboration, cooperation is a no-brainer between the companies, between the civil societies, between the countries, between the cities, what people call 4Cs. And that requires creative and innovative ecosystems. So we definitely participate to the discussions around regulatory and operational frameworks for city logistics. We also, of course, want to bring solutions because we are in this world where we have strategies, we have a vision, but we want to make it real right away. For example, with some cities like the city of Bonn, we have street lockers where, when people are not around at home, you can deliver the goods in these street lockers. We have, of course, hundreds of these. We have also these electric vans, so that help us also doing in-night deliveries because they are silent, which was, of course, an interesting solution, and also in terms of congestion. But also we have also some drone movements that we are testing. Also with the cities like the city of Amsterdam, we have QB cycles where you have little containers that you can put on bikes, and which is the containerization of the last mile. We have also boats there, and also consolidation center, urban consolidation centers, where different logistics providers will bring their goods, and then they get massified, loaded for the last mile, so that you don't have too many movements.
Good. Oliver.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we see that on all of these topics of regulations, control, ways of anticipating what could come next, after years of companies spending a lot of time and energy with moving paper around, what I would call moving paper around, where you send files attached to an email with PDF file, and then it goes back, and then people discuss about it. The most fundamental progress we have seen with cities like Jaipur that we work with, or Singapore, is that at some point, the public operators, private agencies, public agencies, private operators, local companies, startups, big groups, come together with one single referential. They accept to give a little bit of secret sauce of their own business to the common good. Not too much, but enough to increase significantly the value. And when you have established this willingness to collaborate on a platform base where people can swap, trade, exchange information, visualize what all of this experience will be, then suddenly the discussions completely change. It moves from paper to visualization, from document-based approach to virtual environment, where you're not talking about it anymore. You're just experiencing it. And we have seen with a customer like GSL or others that you can combine very well different constraints, different requirements, by putting all that in a referential that everybody agrees to work with to a certain extent. And it's a cultural change. It's a massive cultural change that we see happening all across the world. More and more companies and public operators realize that alone they can do okay, but not to the level of satisfaction that they want to reach to solve some of the biggest problems they have to solve.
Good, good. Obviously, the public is a key part of this discussion too, and so maybe Danielle, flip the question a little bit to back to you in terms of it's not only the private sector, but how do you reach out to the public? How do you reach out to policymakers to make sure they're on board, make sure unintended consequences don't happen that potentially could lead to, rather than innovative approaches, sort of a backlash. So any experience from San Francisco on things that have worked well for you?
I would definitely say having the conversation works wonders. So really, no one wants to pop up one day and then realize that their neighborhood has dramatically changed and no one consulted them. And so what I've been doing is, I just really have like a pop-up, like I'll go to a neighborhood corridor and I will stop different people. And my team and I will ask, how did you get here today? And, very simple, but most of all, like, oh, you live down the block, like, do you normally shop here? And then we'll find that people are like, oh, well, I have coffee here, but for the most part, I really just order everything online. And so it's really interesting to find that discovery. But then it's also like, why are you guys ordering online? And a lot of the time it's like, I don't want to deal with the traffic. I don't want to drive somewhere. I don't want to have to deal with, trying to find a parking space and then trying to load my car. And so I'd rather just, have that regular order system through Amazon, honestly. And so with that, we have a conversation where we're like, well, are you really attached to keeping your parking space, which I like to call free car storage? And so those conversations over time, people are like, oh, maybe I don't need my car. And that's really exciting for me, because for the most part, it's this situation where people are like, I want my cake and I want to eat it too. I want my free car storage, but I also want to get Postmates, and I also want, my Amazon delivery, and then my friends are going to get dropped off. And so for me, that's like 3 different curb touches that are happening. And I'm like, okay, see how your car is sitting there and it might not move for like 5 days. And so I think residents are starting to do that calculation themselves. And it's also the same thing is happening with the merchants. For the most part, merchants thought that most customers came because they parked. And so whenever we try to remove parking, you think that we were like taking everyone's firstborn child. And so now it has changed, and actually we have a survey that we did with merchants, and merchants are saying, actually, we would like most of the corridor for commercial loading. So it's really interesting.
Okay. Oliver, maybe ask you, obviously technology is a key here. Do you think people, as we see some crashes or other kinds of things happening, worried about cybersecurity, do you think the public is losing confidence in technology? And if so, what do we do to sort of bolster that or reinforce the power of technology? And
I think that, today, all of us in this room are individuals before being professionals. And the more we take into account from the very early stage of definition of an experience, from the very early stage of defining a business model, the earlier on we check that all the experiences that we are going to provide will be sustainable over time, will be highly personable, will be secure from a physical safety standpoint, but also secure also from a data exchange standpoint. The more people will have confidence. What we see happening today in the world of technology is that companies who are extremely cautious and extremely careful at protecting this notion of individual experience, integrity of data, and safety of individuals, highly customizable and highly personable technology are doing very well. Are doing very, very well. All the other people who are making some compromise there sooner or later face backlash from individuals. So I don't think it's a problem of technology. It's a question of ethics and methods and control of the code that is being made available.
Good, good. Fathi, you mentioned all the technologies and services that are available, and all of us, probably all of us on the stage included, have gotten to the point of we expect things immediately. So how do you sort of manage expectations among both the public and your customers when it comes to goods movement?
Yeah, because as a well-managed corporation, we have to be first customer-centric. Of course, we need to care about our shareholders because they would expect that we manage their money in the right way, but we have a responsibility towards the citizens, so corporate social responsibility is important there. So for us, when we evaluate these programs, we look at, of course, the benefits that they bring. The benefits in terms of convenience, because the customers are asking for more and more convenience, and they expect that, either the end consumer or corporate customers, because every corporate customer is a consumer, so there is a quest for speed, for excellence simply delivered, actually, I have to say. But then we need also to look at the trade-off in terms of is it cost-effective or not, because we are still measured on our bottom line, and the environmental hazards, what it brings. And for that, in every innovation, we have a program where we try to include these three elements. For example, we realized that in town for the last mile delivery, we had in 35% of the cases, the first delivery attempt failed because the customers were not at home or wherever. For that, we developed an app, an on-time delivery application, so where people can choose the location, the time, the dates, and the area where they want to get their goods delivered. They can also switch that 1 hour before the delivery. And they can switch it to a neighbor, but of course you may have bad neighbors, you would not like it to go to the neighbor, so you can switch it to a parcel locker that is close, or to some service centers. So in the future we will see more and more stores as warehouses, for the last mile. And thanks to that, we decreased this first delivery attempt failure to 10%, from 35 to 10%. So of course you start to see there that you have both return on your investment in terms of the application, the processes, and the business model you develop, but that you also improve the quality of the service that you do. So we have numerous examples related to that. Another one, you would say that it can be very expensive to co-develop with the university your own electric vans for deliveries. But once you work with operators to develop that van, and that it's not just an electric van, which is great in terms of noise, in terms of emissions, but it's highly ergonomic, then you speed up your return on investment, and you can also commercialize your solution to other operators. For example, we are selling 500 of these vans to another corporation. It is a competitor in Japan, Yamato, for example. Yeah.
Are there other examples? You really hit there your last couple comments on sort of return on investment. Obviously, cost is always a key. What other measures do you use, both at a city level and at a technology level, to show the benefits of different approaches, whether it's more sustainable communities or increased revenues for different approaches, different practices? Maybe Danielle, go back to you.
Yeah. So I would say we had an example where we put in a bike lane, which means that we had to get rid of a lot of parking, and so it was a very contentious project. And so after we did the implementation, we did an analysis of really what was the revenue on that corridor, as a lot of the businesses were very concerned. And actually the businesses reported a higher revenue after the change. And so loading became a lot easier and a lot faster, and then more customers started coming. So that was one immediate change. And then I think another thing is, For us, it's emergency response times for ambulances and fire trucks, and also for our service, the transit service. Putting another bus onto a route is extremely expensive because we have to get that vehicle. That's another maintenance, and that's another operator for us. And for us, it's very much about efficiency in that way. And so we're starting to see, as we're reducing congestion, not only are people getting their packages faster, but we're able to deliver more customers throughout the city. So I believe that everybody wins when we work together. So yeah.
Good. Other examples?
Yeah, I mean, we have been working recently for the last year and a half with Renault, who was a department of Renault called LCE, which is an innovation lab, thinking and developing mobility solutions for tomorrow. And one of the key drivers for them was really to develop this project of a new mobility vehicle called Easy Flex. Absolutely fantastic product. They just released it few weeks ago in Paris. Highly modular. They wanted to have something that could accommodate the needs of medical transportation, public goods transportation, workers transportation, etc., etc. Highly modular. And they wanted to bring this product into the market as quickly as possible. And they were able to develop that in roughly 15, 16 months, which is never seen before in the automotive industry. So they were able to piggyback on the industrial power of Renault, but they set aside a team who was obsessed by delivering something very quickly. So they wanted to do tons of tests. They wanted to have plenty of prototypes. They wanted to get as close as possible to the needs of the users, so they had to compute and amass a quantity of information that was quite significant. So they did all of that in the cloud, in a very specific organizational setup, super agile. And to answer your question, what they were measuring precisely was the time to market. Not spend too much time talking about what it could be, but doing it and iterate very fast. And we see that more and more, especially in this topic of last mile, new multimodal systems. A lot of companies say, okay, let's do it. Let's do it and let's iterate very fast. And this is where the power of modeling and simulation allows to do tons of what-if scenario very quickly and test economically that it works, technically that it works, logistically that it is okay, that you can manufacture it, and more importantly, that people who will use it will feel good about it. And when you can see it in advance before producing anything, it helps.
We actually worked with Thales on a route optimization system, and the time to market was fast and it brought efficiencies. And I think that what is also important is to create business models where you integrate different innovations together. For example, if you have electric delivery vans, that allows you to deliver at night, because of course you don't have the noise anymore. But of course, if you deliver at night, you cannot knock on the door of people and deliver the goods. That's why you integrate things like parcel lockers, you deliver to the cars, delivery to trunks, things that are happening already, or to some consolidation centers. And then when you start to integrate all these models together, of course you become cost effective, you have less congestion, which is good for everyone. But what is important for us, you really decrease the emissions. So for example, in the model I told you, which is an integrated one, you can decrease the emission up to 50%, which is something important. And that's what we integrate more and more in our operations concretely, and also with our consumer, where they can visualize their carbon footprint live. Of course, this works for part of the population, but you have another part that will be less interested in that, so that requires information, education about better practices.
And this solution that our friends from DHL are talking about is something that we have developed with them, for them at Dassault Systèmes, exactly in the mode I was describing, which is super iterative, extremely close to the needs, getting smarter and smarter through the capitalization of knowledge and know-how of all the people who are interacting with it, the power of big data. And when you integrate all of that in a very agile way, then people start to feel more and more in confidence with what technology can do for them because it's useful.
Yeah. And that relates, one of the questions from the audience relates a little bit to that. What do you think the artificial intelligence contributing to urban goods movement?
Massive.
Yeah.
Massive because, the quantity of information that you are dealing with is not new. There's been a lot of data around for many, many years. What is new is the fact that you start to inject in systems of knowledge and know-how capitalization tons of data that had nothing to do with each other before. You start to mash up not the traditional information, but information that you didn't even think that you could blend with other information before. So when you have societal studies or sociologic studies mapped with industrial IoT data, flows of open data coming from cities and municipalities, and start to aggregate that in a 3D referential, suddenly people have their brain completely freed up, and creativity unleashes very, very fast. So artificial intelligence is absolutely necessary to imagine future solutions, but it's not the only way. This is not the only way.
Yeah.
So something interesting with artificial intelligence, we use that already to predict some potential hazards, congestions. But I have also an anecdote where artificial intelligence can help you. So this is the link between flu and congestion. So normally there is no link between having a flu epidemic and congestion. So thanks to data mining and to all kind of correlation work or whatever that happens, we realized when people have flu and there's an epidemic, the first day people are close to death, right? The second day they start to feel maybe better. And then the third day they are at home, they cannot move wherever, but what do? They order online. And then when you have a flu epidemic, you start to see in parallel an increase of order and shipments. So we know then when that happens, and thanks to these models, that we need to get ready, on especially some routes where, the epidemic is there, and to integrate that increase. So that's where, in fact, artificial intelligence helps you to go where you never believed you will go. And that's, of course, things that are really directly beneficial to our operations and our activities, besides all the gimmicks and all the elements that you can have behind that.
And that your comment also relates to another question from the audience, and maybe Danielle, I'll start with you on this one, and that is, obviously with the interaction of urban goods movement, pedestrians, bicyclists, there can be crashes, even potentially fatalities. So what do you see as maybe some of the ways that you could reduce that negative interaction, obviously protect pedestrians and cyclists? Are there better practices from an urban goods movement perspective, or any approach that San Francisco's taking to sort of reduce that conflict or potential conflict?
Yeah, I'd say in terms of infrastructure, what we're doing is we actually are moving a lot of our bike lanes towards the curb, and actually moving the loading to kind of buffer that experience. And a perfect example is we have Valencia Street in San Francisco, which is a very bustling restaurant street. And so that has been a big request that's been coming directly from the advocates and from those businesses and residents. And so it has been easier for operators, drivers to see where is a clear space for them to park, but also it's a clear path for cyclists, and it reduces the opportunity for those conflicts. Something else that we're really interested in is, data collection is like, one, did you get to the curb, right? That's very simple, right? But for me, I want to know why you didn't get to the curb, right? So that I can figure out. So it's like, what is the causation that has gotten us to this to this predicament, more or less. And so another example is I want to know not only if there was a collision, but I want to know if there was a near miss. At what velocity, what type of, was it a cyclist and in a large vehicle, or was it just a sedan and a pedestrian, and wanting to know how often those are happening. So moving less from like there has to be some victim to warrant a change. I just want to monitor what are the conflicts that are potential conflicts that are leading up to us actually making a change.
Good, good. How about one of the other questions just deals with the sharing of information between especially mature metropolitan areas, Montreal, San Francisco. Are there obviously venues like this do it, but are there other ways that you from the city perspective and just in your sharing information on what you're doing in different metropolitan areas, any techniques that are working better, and how do you get the message out when things are you've done something that works well in one area to try to replicate it someplace else, again, given different politics, policies, rules and regulations at the local levels?
You have the processes, you have the rules, you have the visions, but what is key there is the mindset, and the mindset has to start from the top of the corporation and pertain everywhere. Yeah? So once you start to have that collaborative mindset, and of course in terms of cooperation you start with that collaborative mindset inside, because naturally you become much more collaborative outside. So once you have that mindset, then you look for the right forums where you can work together, where you can share the right information, because of course there are also regulations in terms of information sharing. And that's why we would rely sometimes on cities, certainly for urban logistics. I think that the future will come from cities. So that's where the future is, and where you come together in setups where you can share information in the right way. You may have some confidential information, but then you have a stakeholder who can treat that in the most confidential way, and then together you have a roadmap and you come with tangible solutions that are hopefully measurable, because we can now measure a lot of the carbon emissions. We have the tools for that together. We have united platforms, and thanks to that we see really things progressing. But really, this will really come from major cities in the world. That's why we have a function, a group related to city logistics. We have a senior VP city logistics who is driving these programs together with the different stakeholders, the cities, the service providers, the technology providers.
Yeah, I fully agree. Both of us are going to tell you, yes, the cities are the future of this approach. Yeah, we have been working with a lot of cities across the world, so with Singapore in particular for almost 6 or 7 years now. And Singapore organized an event on a regular basis called the World City Summit. And every time we try to attend this kind of event, because this is an opportunity to learn from each other. And more interestingly, we have seen that even in the case of a city in India that we work with in Jaipur, was extremely advanced in the way of thinking about mobility for tomorrow. You realize that all of them have decided to do an immense effort in being inclusive, really inclusive of the citizen. Even during the early stage of their thinking, even when things are still in shambles, not completely defined, they have taken the risk. They have the political courage of exposing themselves, saying, we don't know for sure, but what do you think? And involve early and enough the citizens in imagining what's next. And it has paid for a lot of them.
Good, good. We have another specific question about DHL and truck sharing. Maybe expand a little bit on some of your earlier comments.
Yes. So, and actually we will plan to introduce that also in San Francisco. We have it already in New York and some cities. So normally when you use historically a truck, you call, a few days ahead. Normally for that truck, you get it loaded wherever, and that's fine. However, we realize that for the last mile, you have a lot of last-minute changes and evolutions, plus all kind of congestion elements. So the idea, why not use already the vehicles that are already in town, that are already in the move in town, like Uber, and that optimize the kilometers and the load factors of this car. So we Uberized, our activities, and we developed applications where, you can order a vehicle or whatever for a certain delivery, an individual delivery or a corporate delivery. We start first with, of course, the corporate deliveries for the last mile. And in fact, we are disrupting ourselves in a certain way, but that's the future. And certainly for last mile, we will see more and more of that. And we don't do it at the country level. We do it city by city, because that's where, we can have the right agreements, right collaboration, and right optimization. Plus, we have a mean there to measure, the CO2 savings we make here.
It hasn't come up yet, but what about unmanned aerial vehicles or systems, UVAs or drones? Do you see any applications or what do you see in terms of applications in urban areas and opportunities or especially challenges and safety issues, cybersecurity issues? Maybe Danielle, start with you.
Yeah, when I think about air drones and things like that, I'm really thinking about going back to the why, and so I would dare say some package delivery is more important than others. For instance, if you're sending like an EpiPen to someone and like that seems really crucial. It's like medication and things like that. I think sending someone a burrito is very different, right? And so I'm kind of like, it goes back to the why. But I did participate in a drone charrette just a few months ago, and I was like, I can barely get a car to the curb in some neighborhoods. I don't know where I would park a drone. Like, there's no drone parking right now, so I think like it's ultimately creating the roof, right? But for us, we're trying to green all of our roofs, and so that's another factor for us. And so I'm like, are you solving a problem, or is it potentially creating a new problem?
Okay, good.
Yeah. So with drones, you have first, of course, the perceived risks. You have regulations. Then, of course, you have a lighter weight that you can move. And, of course, you have the distance. Having said that, we have already drones in our operations in remote areas, also across the rivers, along the shores, for critical medicines, for blood, for critical spare parts. And I'm pleased to announce that we have the first scheduled drone movement in China. So it's 8 kilometers from the DHL premises to the customer's premises, because it's a customer center there. And it's a scheduled service that we have. So this is happening. So, but as you rightly said, it should not be just a gimmick or whatever. You need to have an economic reason, a reason where it adds value, where it's safe, where it makes sense. But I can see that really developing a lot. And certainly, eventually, in a place like Canada, where there's a lot of space, there are big areas, sometimes from one house to another, wherever, so that maybe can help, delivering, crucial items. And for us, a purpose we have is, of course, to deliver excellence and, of course, to improve the lives of the people and connect them. And so this is something that is very relevant in what we do. So in the future, we'll see more and more of that, but in a multimodal perspective.
Yeah.
Just a very, very quick comment. I cannot comment too much on some of these projects because they are relatively confidential from our customers. But what we see is that we have the historical drone companies, the big guys that everybody knows, who are obviously extremely interested by these scenarios. But what is more interesting is that we see companies from the transportation and mobility industry, the automotive industry, from the high-tech industry, from even the life science industry, who are right now, as we speak, developing and inventing their own systems of drones. So the most interesting part is to see that the traditional players that we expect to see in this domain are there for sure, but we also see other industries penetrating in this space because they realize that this is for them in some cases absolutely critical to control by themselves this last mile.
Excellent. We've got just about 30 seconds left. Closing comment on something you'd like the audience to think about as they move forward with urban goods movement in their area.
Yeah, I would just say it's about collaboration, and it's not easy. Like, there will be friction points, but I think the biggest point is to realize that when we all succeed, it's going to make the change. And so that's really what my focus has been.
Yeah, I would say that it's about innovation, digitalization also, but also importantly, education and information of the public, the consumers, the citizens, the employees about responsible consumer practices and their implications. Something else that I would like to add is that too much data can be a pollution also, because in terms of energy that is created, you may know that the energy produced by the data that is created now is more than the transportation. So that will be, in a way, the next challenge, how to make this full connectivity more also responsible.
Good. Any final?
I think that I will say just thank you to the organizers because they created in this forum an atmosphere of not lecturing or teaching, but sharing and doing. So we have been, all of us, in so many conferences in the past where we are looking at people telling us what could happen. Here, for today's, we are making it happen. So there are clearly a lot of very interesting side discussions happening in this forum. So I think that the time of doing and not talking is now. So
Great.
now is the time to do.
Well, please join me in thanking our panelists. Outstanding session. And again, a lot of great ideas, a lot of good comments. So thank you all.
Thank you.